where you just keep them for the rest of their or all their childhood and then just feed them, occasionally go there and just feed them so we all feel good about it. No, you won't see it. The Quran actually speaks about raising them up. That you have to be like a mentor or like a guardian. You won't see any verses speaking about put them all in a place and then you start giving them money. No. Now, temporary basis, we may do it. We may have to do it because not every society has the financial capacity to actually adopt kids. But we know that the Quran encourages it. The Quran encourages adoption, taking people. Even the Prophet who received the Quran itself was adopted. He had an adopted son, and the Quran specifies that. So adoption is very much encouraged. So if you have the financial means to actually support an orphan, maybe it's a distant relative, go ahead and take them, bring them home if you can. You can support. Maybe you don't have to give everything what you give to your own children. Maybe you cannot do it. But if you can give them a home, that's the best thing you can do. That's the best thing you can do. You can give them a father figure, a mother, siblings, that environment. If you can give them, that would be the best. Even if you can only feed them like 2 times a day. Because that's what the Quran emphasizes on. It's about giving them a family environment. That's why polygamy was permitted, because if you think about it, why do you need to marry a woman to support an orphan? Makes no sense, right? You can just give them money, make sure they're in a safe place, that's it. No, but God says you may marry them because you can play the role of a father figure. You can give them protection. Somebody asks them, who are you, where are you from? I belong to this family. You see, so that sense of belonging is what God wants us to give orphans. It's not just dumping them in a place, giving them food, and then occasionally visiting them and giving them some money and feeling good about ourselves. Of course, we have our own limitations, but if we can go above and beyond that, that will be very much, it will be a very good opportunity for us to grow our souls. And this is, you can see, this is very much emphasized in the Quran. You see, for example, in Surah 220, God says, upon this life and the hereafter, and they ask you about the orphans. Say, bringing them up as righteous persons is the best you can do for them. So the Quran is very clear. The Quran is not saying put them in a place and just feed them 3 times a day. That's the best thing you can do. No, it says bringing them up is the best as righteous people, as Muslims, as mu'mins. That's the best thing that you can do. So yes, giving them food, water, shelter is not a bad thing. It's a righteous deed also. But the best thing that you can do for an orphan is to give them a home, is give them guidance, is bring them up as righteous people. Why is that? Because if you look at an orphan is not merely, is not merely at a disadvantage of amenities or food or water or shelter. An orphan is at a disadvantage of guidance. There's no father figure there. The father is not giving any protection. There's no father there. They are very much prone to abuse, manipulation, all sorts of emotional trauma. They are very much vulnerable because they're kids and nobody is there to protect them. You see. Now maybe there may be a mother. In some cases there may be a mother, but the mother has her own limitations. She herself is dependent on someone else for her own protection. You see. So there's a limitation for a single parent also. So that's the reason why God encourages us, the Muslims, to always ensure that orphans are provided for. Not just provided for in terms of material things, but also. So if you find a woman who has an orphan kid, the father has passed away, as a community we have to make sure that we try our best to make sure that she remarries. And the child has a father. We can just decide to just say, okay, yeah, we just give her our money, we just put her in a house, and then we just give her money and the kid and make sure she's safe. We can do that on a temporary basis, but as a community, we have to run behind making sure the child and the mother, there is a father figure in the home. Because otherwise, this child is prone to all kinds of problems, like drug abuse, If it's a girl, that's even more disastrous, because there's all kinds of people out there trying to take opportunity of that situation. So it is the community has a responsibility. That's why God says, if you fear for the orphans, so you have to have fear. If you fear, injustice will be done to the orphans, and this is in Surah Nisa. It's very important. You have to have that fear. If you don't have any fear, you just give the money and that's it. That you are not a submitter. The submitter is always someone who worries about the orphans. So as this verse says, bringing them up as righteous persons is the best you can do for them. If you mix their property with yours, you shall treat them as family members. See, the Quran is even talking about mixing your property with theirs, which means you're not just feeding them, you're taking care of their affairs also. If they have a house, you go there and take care of the affairs. You make sure that the property is maintained. You may mix your property with theirs. So it's basically you're a caretaker of the orphans. And God said you shall treat them as family members. So this orphan may not be related to you. Maybe the son of a submitter who passed away for some reason. So it's not even related to you, but you have to treat them as your family members. That's the emphasis that the Quran puts on us towards orphans. God knows the righteous and the wicked. Had God willed, He would have imposed harsher rules upon you. God is Almighty, most wise. So this is what the Quran teaches us. One, we treat them as our own family members. We have to go to that extent. Second, we have to make sure that we do everything in our capacity to raise them as righteous individuals, not just putting some money in their bank account so they can have three times meal. We have to go above and beyond that and make sure they have security, they have guidance, they have a father figure or a mother. If it's a mother, that's not there, a mother. So we have to help them get married, find a partner, and have a complete family. And also God gives us guidance on how we manage their properties. It's very important, because if we abuse their property, we are definite. It's a one-way ticket to hell, for sure. If you abuse the property of an orphan, you are definitely going to hell. So that's why God says, you shall hand over the orphans their rightful properties. It's very tempting, If the orphan has a lot of properties, it is very tempting to take something. But God says, you shall hand over orphans their rightful properties. Do not substitute the bad for the good, and do not consume their properties by combining them with yours. This would be a gross injustice. So because they are unaware, they're young. So if you have the opportunity to combine their property with yours, you have to be absolutely just. Make sure that you are fair. Everything is accounted for, everything that comes in, everything that comes out. So that's a huge responsibility. And God says, if you do something that's unrighteous, that would be a gross injustice. And again, in the same case of property, God says, do not, in Surah 4, verse 5, do not give immature orphans and the properties that God has entrusted with you as guardians. So again, the Quran is teaching us that we are supposed to act as guardians to the orphans. But we have to be sensible. We cannot just, they're orphans, I'll just give it to them and get rid of my responsibility. No, we have to wait until they become mature, and because it's God has entrusted it on you to take care of their properties. So you have a responsibility towards God, because He entrusted the properties in your hands. You shall provide for them therefrom, and clothe them and treat them kindly. So you have to use that property not for your own gain, but use the properties or the wealth that has been entrusted upon you by God to feed them, to provide for them, clothe them, and treat them kindly. Inshallah, we'll look at another verses in the next verse. You can. Alhamdulillah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Praise be to God, I bear witness that there is no God but God, and He has no partners. So, if you look at, again, the verses that speak about how we manage the property of orphans, God says, that you shall test, this is in Surah 4 verse 6, you shall test the orphans when they reach puberty. As soon as you find them mature enough, give them their property. So you have to always remember that when you manage the property of the orphans, you have to return it back. But you return it back at a time when they are mature, they fully understand what the situation is, they're capable of making decisions. Once you test them and you make sure that they are running things on their own, you have to hand it over to them. Do not consume it extravagantly in a hurry before they grow up. So God is telling us that you have to manage this in a very responsible way. Do not consume it. They are now getting it. Because people do this. We know people eat up other people's property. Even family members. Family members are the first people who eat up your property. So they want to take it before the child becomes 18, because when the child becomes 18, then there's a legal problem. So they want to make sure that they get as much as they can, all the borders are sealed, and then they leave nothing for the child. So do not consume it extravagantly in a hurry before they grow up. The rich guardian shall not charge any wage. You see, so it's all in favor of the orphans. All the rules in the Quran is for the orphans. You're just doing a job that God has made entrusted upon you. The rich guardian shall not charge any wage, but the poor guardian may charge equitably. So if a person is struggling and is taking care of affairs, they may charge, which is equitable, which is fair. When you give them their properties, you shall have witness. God suffice as a reckoner. So I don't know. I don't know how many acres or how many hectares. Maybe 10 or 10. No, everything is accounted for, and you have to have witnesses. So when you take over a property of an orphan, there has to be witnesses. You give it back, there has to be witnesses. It's not in the air. Generally, a lot of people in our culture, especially, everything is in the air. Unless someone says, no, we have to put it in a document. The Quran says that you have to have everything documented. So this is what God speaks about, how we handle the orphans. Very, very, very critical. Like I said, it's a one-way ticket to either hell or heaven. You abuse them, you're going to hell for sure. No matter what you do, no matter how many prayers you've done, you're gone. You consume their properties, you're in trouble. Your soul is completely corrupted because they are innocent and they have no guardian. So you're acting as a guardian. And also, God speaks about many other verses where God gives us different methods by which we can protect them. And in most of these verses, we don't see this whole idea of putting them in an orphanage. I've not seen it in the Quran. If someone has, please bring to my attention. But it is not there. Where we may temporarily do that, like I said, but it's always about fostering them, being a father figure, or adopting them. I see adoption in the Quran. There's an example of the Prophet himself. The Prophet himself was an orphan, so the Quran was given to an orphan according to history. So that is what we see in the Quran. So that's why there's so much emphasis here. And God says, and polygamy is one of those solutions. In a particular situation, polygamy is permitted, where there's orphans and there's no guardian for them. A woman is left with a child, probably a Muslim or anyone who is in a situation where there's no father there. So in those situations, if the woman has no other option, this is why God says in the condition that you have to have fear. So which means the community as a whole does not know what to do with it, like what to do with this woman and this child. There's no men ready to marry her, or all the men that are already married, or for whatever reason the community is very small, or something of that nature. So if that's the case, then we have to find a solution, and the solution in that case is polygamy. It's permitted, although not always. God has definitely made it very clear that it's not encouraged. It's only in a specific situation God says to stick to one. So in Surah 4 verse 3, God says, if you deem it best for the orphans, if you deem it best, that's the best thing, that's the best solution. There's no other solution that you can work for them. So that's why there's a fear. You may marry their mothers. You may marry 2, 3 or 4. If you fear, lest you become unfair, then you shall be content with only one, or with what you already have. So if someone is already married, God says that if you can't do this thing, don't do it. And if somebody is not married, also God says stick to one. Support one orphan child through marriage. Don't take more. Being fair is absolutely important. So this is and God says additionally you are thus more likely to avoid financial hardship. So if you stick to one, you can support one woman with a child through marriage, being the father figure, but stick with that. God says if you can't do it, don't go for it. But a solution has been permitted, and this is during that particular situation where there were no other people. Now, as the community grows, the possibility of a widowed woman with a child having a husband is more better. But during those times, it wasn't. And the community had a responsibility because these men died for God. You see, that's the difference. They were in the battlefield and they died for God. So abandoning their families is a gross injustice. Because it's like they were fighting along with you and they lost their life for God. So as the community had a huge responsibility towards taking care of those children and their wives. They couldn't abandon them. So that's why God says, okay, we can't give them to the disbelievers. You may indulge in polygamy. And also in cases of when God speaks about distribution of inheritance, if you have a lot of property and you are sharing, there also God says that we have to be aware of the orphans, the poor and the orphans. So if you have a family, they may not necessarily be a submitter, but if you have a family member who's an orphan, you make sure you give something out of it. It will benefit your soul. God says in Surah 4 verse 8, during the distribution of inheritance, if relatives, orphans and needy persons are present, you shall give them therefrom and treat them kindly. So God has given a specific instruction there that orphans have to be considered during whatever you may get. If you feel that, let's say your sister lost her husband and there are 2 kids, or some other reason there's no guardian for these children. As a submitter, you should not sit there, take my share and run. That's what most people do. Take the share and run. No, we have a property. We have to do checking. Do I have a mother's sister or a sister's daughter who lost her husband and has kids? You have to go and give them something. Give them something. So that's why being present does not necessarily mean that they are in the room. If they are there, good. But if they are not, because they are immediate family, but they may not be necessarily present in the same room as the distribution is happening. But it's your duty, them that they are very close relatives and there's an orphan there. We have to go and give them a share of our property. God says about also consuming orphans' property. Very strong words are used in the Quran. In Surah 4 verse 10, those who consume orphans' properties unjustly eat fire into their bellies. This is why I said it's a one-way ticket to hell. Definitely you're eating fire into your bellies and will suffer in hell. It's very, very clear. So you may do a lot of salah, zakah and everything, but if you're unjustly consuming the property of an orphan, who will suffer in hell. There's no other question about it. So this is what the Quran teaches, and in Surah 4, verse 127, God says, they consult you concerning women. Say, God enlightens you regarding them, as recited for you in Scripture. You shall restore the rights of orphan girls whom you cheat out of their dowries when you wish to marry them. You shall not take advantage of them. The rights of the orphan boys must also be protected as well. You shall treat the orphans equitably. Whatever good you do, God is fully aware thereof. This is such a powerful verse because this is what happens with a lot of orphan people. We have so many orphans. It doesn't just go to somewhere in the Middle East. You go somewhere, there's wars, children. What do you think happens to the girls who are orphaned? What do you think? We know what happens. They're abused, sometimes horribly raped, shipped to different places, married by 60-year-old men. So this is what the Quran says, that we should not take advantage of them. God says very clearly that if you shall restore the rights of the orphan girls whom you cheat out of the dowries when you wish to marry them. So if you're going to marry an orphan girl, don't say, oh yeah, I just have to give something. Be fair. They may be orphan, they may not have a guardian to tell you, no, you have to give this much to my daughter. They don't have a father to tell you or demand that you give them fair dowry. So there are men who will just pay peanuts and marry these women because there's no actual father figure. Sometimes they'll give some little money to the relative and then they'll just ship them off. So God says that you should not do that. You shall restore the rights of whom you cheat out of their dowries. So you should make sure that their future is secure in some ways when you marry them. Don't take advantage of their situation just because they don't have a guardian. The rights of the orphan boys must also be protected. You shall treat orphans equitably. Whatever good you do, God is fully aware thereof. So throughout the Quran, we see so many examples of how we should treat the orphans with complete justice, with empathy, with compassion, and a very strong sense of responsibility. We have to seek out orphans in our families, in our communities, and do whatever best we can. If there's an orphan child somewhere, we know it, there's a mother there. Of course, we have to support them financially, but let's go above and beyond and make sure that they have a family set up. At least someone adopting them, giving them a house. That would be ideal. That's what the Quran teaches us. Inshallah, may God guide us to do our best in ensuring that the rights of the orphans are protected so that we are rewarded in the hereafter. Aqim as-salam.